I'm going to tell you which Jaguars are in the top 10 in the league at their respective positions and who's close. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. Welcome to another edition of today's podcast. We're at your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen. We also are on YouTube, and it's free. You can sign in, log in, and subscribe to the Locked On Jaguars YouTube page. Make sure you hit that like button. Also, hit the bell so you get notifications of every time we drop a new episode. And if you listen to audio podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you tap in every single day to make sure that you don't miss an episode. Also, thank you to the everydayers. I had to get that out, man. I had a little bit of a freeze. But I ain't forget about you guys. Thank you very much for joining us every single day. You make the show what it is, and we really, really appreciate you. And if you're a new listener, welcome to the show. And we're glad to have you here. We're going to talk today about top 10 lists. I saw one the other day. I lost it. I misplaced it. I didn't like it anyway, and I don't need it to make a reference. But I will tell you this, that somebody did a top 10 list at every single position, and there weren't very many Jaguar players ranked on anybody's top 10, or especially in this top 10 list. So we won't be able to include that one in the show because, one, I didn't want to, but then two, the other thing is, I got my own top 10 list, and I'll tell you where. And I'm going to be objective or subjective, whichever one it is. Objective. How about that? I'm going to be that. And I'm going to tell you the honest truth of where I think some Jaguars players rank, who can actually get a little closer, who's close, who's right on the precipice or right at the threshold where they're not necessarily a top 10 player at the respective positions, and who I honestly believe is very, very close. And then I'll say who needs to be, who's the sleeper candidate. So as you can see, Jaguars in the top 10, who's next to rise up, and then our sleeper top tier candidates. Let me tell you why it's important though. If let's just say the Jaguars have 35 guys on a scale of 1 to 10, they're all 7.5. That means they'll probably be very, very good, make runs into the playoffs. And if they have the right chemistry and all of these things go right and correctly and everything lines up, then maybe they can win something, right? But normally, those kind of players only get you so far. Coach, the system, and everything gets you so far. If you watched the playoffs last year, it came down to dudes making plays, guys who were just built differently, doing things that guys that are built differently do. So therefore, you need some players on your team that are recognized. The recognition isn't what makes them make the plays. The playmaking gives them the recognition. So you need guys that get that recognition and garners that respect from the opponents in order for the team to consistently compete for a title and be able to make those plays. 2 straight Super Bowls, we saw guys doing things that were in conjunction with the coaching and in conjunction with the scheme and the whole team concept. But every now and then in those moments where those X's and O's are needed, you see a guy like Kadarius Toney do something wild. Or prior to that, the year before, you'd see Aaron Donald make a play when Jamar Chase was wide open. He was so good. He made that play and he caused that sack. You saw early in the game, one-handed catches by Jamar Chase. Another one where T. Higgins got away with a play against another great player in Jalen Ramsey. And then you saw ultimately Cooper Kupp, play after play after play. They knew everybody in the whole stadium knew a couple of years ago that Cooper Kupp was going to be the guy that Matthew Stafford was going to try to win the game. And that's exactly what he did. It's like you can know it's coming all you want to, but he's just that good. So it takes special, special players. Who are the Jaguars that I believe are in the top 10 right now? I'm going to tell you who. And then I'm going to tell you who's missing in segment 2. Trevor Lawrence is definitely a top 10 quarterback. I'm going to tell you right now, at the end of this season, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback. All right. Which means, in my opinion, he probably is a top 5 quarterback right now. It's just that it's a demonstrated performance, as we always say. So you have to wait a little bit in order for that to come true. But there's no doubt in my mind that anybody that looks at quarterbacks that thinks that Trevor Lawrence isn't a top 10 quarterback needs to go get their eyes checked, and probably needs to reevaluate whether they're a good football watcher or not, because the kid absolutely has all those goods after only 2 seasons. I think Travis Etienne is a top 10 running back. I really, really do. And that could mean that a lot of the guys who are household names like Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara, I think Christian McCaffrey's probably still there. But I mean, a lot of it's a changing of the guard now, right? Of course, Derrick Henry's still there, Jonathan Taylor's still there, but Saquon is there. But it's a bit of a changing of the guard where we're looking for these new guys. We're looking for the new guys. And Travis Etienne, in one healthy season, in my opinion, has catapulted himself because of his ability to explode and make big plays. And he's learning how to run inside and get those tough yards and not try to make everything a home run. I think he's already considered a top 10 running back. That's my opinion. It may be an opinion of other people. I don't know. Calvin Ridley is close, seriously close. I think had he not missed last season, he would probably still rank in the consciousness of a lot of people. But there are a lot of good wide receivers in this league, man. I mean, the top 5 is almost a consensus, but then you got 5 or 6 guys right behind there that are really, really, really knocking on the door. A couple of them play for the same team, like in Cincinnati, right? So, but I think he's close. I just think that year away, he's kind of removed from the thought process and the mindset of anybody who would be willing to make a list. I'm going to tell you somebody right now who is on the list. He's top 10 at his position. Jamal Agnew, in my opinion, is one of the top kick returners or return specialists in the league. In fact, he's easily top 10, and he ain't 4 through 10. He's in the top 3. And he might even be better than that when you add in a guy like maybe Cordell Patterson. But Jamal Agnew is, in my opinion, one of the top 2 or 3 at his respective position. And if you don't think that's important, I don't know what to tell you, because he absolutely changed games last year when the Jaguars needed him to do it the most. He's one of those guys that's so good at what he does. When he grabs a kickoff at a pivotal moment of the game, if the kickoff is 8-9 yards deep, you can best believe he's coming out with it, and he don't care. He's going to get at least to the 25-yard line. And he scares the daylights out of the opponents. And that's one of the prerequisites and things that has to happen for a guy to be considered great. All right, so who's next? Who is next to possibly rise up? You notice I haven't mentioned anybody on defense yet, right? So I'm going to get to the defensive side of the ball and tell you who's there and who's close, if anybody is there. And then we'll discuss who our sleeper candidates are and who are guys who this team actually needs in segment 3 to actually come out of nowhere and make some noise. So we'll do all that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. I first must let you know that today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on to join today. Now, I actually need help with baseball. I have to understand the rotations, who's playing, who's not, what's a guy's ERA. You need all of that. FanDuel will give you all of that information before you make your wager. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, man. We're glad y'all joined us here today on Locked On Jaguars, talking about top 10. Top 10 lists come and top 10 lists go, and people have the right to their opinion, and we have the right to ours. Which Jaguars are top 10 at their respective positions? We already said that Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Jamal Agnew, and Calvin Ridley is close, but not White. So he's going to make the who's next list for me. He's a guy that could actually get back in the top 10 with a stellar year. Of course, that comes along with winning. I'm not necessarily one of those dudes that, let me tell you how I look at this. I look at bad teams. I look at guys on bad teams that put up big numbers, right? And I say it is what it is. It doesn't mean that they're a bad player. And then I look at guys on good teams that have to share the ball that don't put up the numbers sometimes that they probably could, like a T. Higgins, right? Then there's this other balance. I look at those situations and then I take the situation out of it and I just watch the guy play, because you're still playing against NFL players. You're still in a position where you're really, really trying to the guys are trying to stop you just like they're trying to stop other people. So sometimes you can actually have an opinion on this without factoring in a whole bunch of factors that cause you to have a bunch of subjective and sort of real, second guessing yourself based on a bunch of different scenarios. So let me go over to the defense real quick. Is there anybody on the defense that's already a top 10 player at their position? There's some people that are going to say Josh Allen. I would disagree. I would disagree. I don't think he's a top 10 edge rusher. I think he's in the close category when he is playing at his absolute best. But no, the one thing about Josh is he's consistent. And that consistency means he's consistently teasing you about how good he could be. And you have these high expectations. That's the one thing that has never happened. I've never lost my expectation for Josh Allen to be a good player or to make plays or to do things. So I guess that means he's steady Eddie and he's good enough that he always has you wondering and guessing, is this the day? Is this the day? Is this the day that he turns into a sack machine and gets 3 sacks? I think Foy Oluwakan is really, really close. And it's probably hard. We'd be hard pressed to find 10 off-ball linebackers that have because a lot of teams don't use those guys like that anymore, at least this way. It's hard to find people with this production over the last 3 years, the last season here with Jacksonville, and of course, the 2 prior years with the the last 2 years here with Jacksonville, and then the prior seasons the last year with Jacksonville and the prior 2 seasons with the Atlanta Falcons. You might be hard pressed to find guys to put up those numbers, but remember, this isn't about stats. You could have a lot of tackles as a linebacker because you have a lot of opportunities because, you can't stop them up front, right? And those guys actually get to you. And kudos to him for making all of those plays. I think before I put him there, though, I'd like to see him do more than just his job, like play above the X's and O's a little bit, maybe with an interception or a sack here or there and more tackles for loss. But I think he's a very, very good player. He's definitely worth all of the money that they paid for him. Tyson Campbell is one that the pure numbers aren't there, but also I don't believe people throw at him very much, right? I mean, how can a guy have numbers if every time you look up, the quarterback doesn't throw it? I don't think the quarterback's not throwing at Tyson Campbell because they're afraid of him. It ain't like he's an interception machine. I do think people aren't throwing at Tyson Campbell because the dude he's covering isn't open. So quarterbacks are taught and trained not to force footballs. And that there's an easier throw somewhere else. There's an easier target. There's something with less risk going on somewhere else, because Tyson is a big physical dude for a corner. He's over 6'1". He's about 6'1", maybe a little bit taller, right at 200 pounds. He's physical. He plays it tough. So there's some talk. Somebody had him ranked, I think, between 25 and 30. I thought that was ridiculous. I do know this: if you had a draft, I don't think 10, because he's young, I don't think 10 guys get chosen before Tyson Campbell. I really, really don't, but I don't quite think he's there. Somebody else that's really, really close, Devon Hamilton. Devon Hamilton is, I think he's probably liked more by coaches and scouts than he is by members of the media. And that's because he doesn't play with a lot of splash. He doesn't put up these gaudy numbers. And He's not thought of as the same as a guy like Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee. He's just as big. Might not be as quick, but he might be as quick. He's a big physical dude that can play inside, play outside, play three technique. He can two gap. He can play 0 and the 1. He can play in. He can be a big end. He is a versatile species. So there are guys like Dexter Lawrence, and of course, I just mentioned Simmons, Jeffrey Simmons. Those guys are thought of differently. And of course, then you have Aaron Donald and Chris Jones, and that's just a whole nother level of think piece that you have to do with these dudes. But I think that's what he's measured against. He's being measured against those folks who make a lot of plays and do a lot of things that normally you wouldn't have seen defensive linemen do. I think he's a lot more disruptive than we all imagine. And I think this year he's going to show it. I really do think when you say who's next, who's going to rise up, I think Devon Hamilton is one of those guys. So I want to talk about two players in particular that I believe are rise candidates. Rise. So I said two. I might hit a third too. I might hit a third player who I believe. Oh, let me get to this. There was some talk yesterday about this with a buddy of mine, Evan Ingram. Is Evan Ingram a top 10 tight end based on one season? Sure. But I'd say that there aren't a lot of real dominant tight ends. That's why whenever you have a chance to get one, you keep them. The Travis Kelce's, and when he's healthy, Darren Waller, and of course, George Kittle and Mark Andrews. Those guys are in a whole world by themselves. And I know people like to take Kyle Pitts and stick him in there, but that's all based on potential. But the other dudes I mentioned are all world, and they're not a whole bunch of other guys behind them. Maybe like a Gerald Everett or a Tyler Higbee. There's some players that are behind them. Freiermuth is making a little bit of noise up in Pittsburgh. TJ Hawkinson, of course. But I'd throw Evan Ingram right there in the second half of that. But on a weighted scale, it doesn't carry the same amount of weight to me as these other guys, even though it's critical. It's critical for the Jaguars to have a tight end that can catch the ball, just like it is critical for Kansas City to have one. But everybody doesn't play it that way. A lot of people throw the ball to mostly their wide receivers, and they have sort of a rotation at tight end as opposed to just having one guy that they love to go to. There's a bunch of different people. So Evan Ingram does make it. He's a top 10 tight end, but you have to explain that. You got to walk through that a little bit before you just go ahead and say it. All right. So segment number 2, what I'm going to do is segment number 3. I'm sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some guys. I'm going to tell you two guys that I believe can be risers this year to be considered tops, top 10 at least at their positions. We'll do that in the third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Thank you for joining us, making us your first listen because it's your team every day. We've talked about Jaguars in the top 10 at their respective positions, who's next to possibly rise up and who's close. Now we're going to do sort of a sleeper candidate to enter that top tier. Now, this is where all of that objectivity and all that stuff kind of goes out the window because this is just really a gut feeling. And it's also what I want to happen, because if this happens, then this means the Jaguars are going to have a bunch of success. So I'm not going to just name guys because I want them or I like them as people and how they carry themselves. I'm doing it because they really, I believe, have an absolute shot to take the next step. And I've seen the hard work. And it's because of their football character, their hard work, and what their approach is that I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that safety Andre Cisco and edge Trayvon Walker have a very good chance with their play this year to establish themselves as top 10 players at their positions. Now, even with the safety position, even though some teams don't play it free and strong anymore, they kind of split them and they have dual responsibilities. When I mention Andre Cisco, I am talking about free safety. And I probably wouldn't do that if it was another player who was playing another way, but I'm going to do it for Cisco because I think the way Andre Cisco plays the game is a more difficult way to play than someone who's playing a split safety. I think a lot of times when he's lined up in single high, He is your last line of defense. He is the last line of defense, man. And he has to be a dude that doesn't give up too much underneath, doesn't get so caught up in protecting the back end that he allows the middle to be soft. He has to, whenever they're playing cover two, he has to make sure if the corner jams or misses his jams that he can get over there before the ball does and separate that receiver from the ball and do it without getting a penalty. He also has to come up and run support, and he has to be the dude that runs around all over the field. To me, defensively, this guy, along with maybe an off-ball linebacker, is the most conditioned guy on the field, and along with the corners, of course, especially if the receivers keep running those 9 routes. But I think Andre Cisco has a shot. He really, really does. He pops on tape. He has a knack for the ball. He's a big hitter. He makes people pay for real estate. Um, he plays like he has a lien on all of that grass, and every time you come by there, you got to pay a tax. That's how he plays. But then, if you notice, he finds it. He found his way, to take that thing back into the end zone, and also to get tipped balls. He's just all over the place, and I think you'd be crazy to not to acknowledge the fact that that kid can play. And I think the sky's the limit. And if he continues to develop and continues to get better, and I don't know if y'all have seen him close up, he's yoked. He is bigger. It looks like he can make muscle videos. And he hasn't lost any speed. So I think he's one of the hardest working guys off the team. He gets it. He understands what it's all about. And I really do think that if this were a draft, I think he'd be another player that scouts loved, maybe more than media guys. Last but not least, Trayvon Walker. Why do I believe that? Well, I've seen him this year. He is in tip-top shape again. Arms as long as ever. And it kind of, I gasped. I saw him standing next to a dude at training camp or OTAs that was taller than him. And the other guys, the tip of the guy's finger, basically when they were side by side, like came to like above Trayvon's wrist. And it was wild because they were almost shoulder to shoulder, but the other guy's head was, his neck was longer, but they were almost shoulder to shoulder. But I think Trayvon could barely bend down and he could probably tie his shoes. That's how long his arms are. The other thing, though, is he's disciplined, and he doesn't listen to too much outside. No, he laughed when I asked him when he was going to start disengaging. I caught the little chuckle, and he laughed because I think he's probably heard me say something like that before. And 9 times out of 10 to him, it makes absolutely no sense because there's probably people that aren't telling him anything to do what I was saying that he should be doing. But always a gentleman, but always just very frank. I did an interview with him not too long ago. I think it was like over a month ago when there was OTAs. And I asked him, was he tempted to sometimes break discipline and do something other than what the scheme calls for him to do? He said, I'll never do that because I need to keep my job. And that is a very professional answer, and it sounds like someone who gets it. I didn't give him a softball question to elicit that response, but when he said it, I was really hopeful that that's what he would say. I wanted him to tell the truth and how he really, really felt. It turns out he said, and the way he said it, in the most matter-of-fact way, that he ain't breaking no discipline. He ain't worried about me talking about no disengaging. That ain't what he said, but that's the way I got it. And he was just like, I just need to continue to get better, do everything that they're asking me to do. And I've heard no one, by the way, complain about him not doing and being where he's supposed to be. He admitted that there's a couple of plays that he made as a rookie that was sort of boneheaded that he can't do. And it might have cost him a game or two when in critical moments. May have been from frustration. I think one of them probably came when he was being held and they wouldn't call it. And then when he finally broke through, they blew the whistle. And so he took the quarterback and he slung him around. I think that's when they played Houston here in Jacksonville. But I really do believe that this is going to be the year that he busts out and breaks out because he's playing his position now we moved around a lot in college. They have him doing, even though they have him doing multiple things, some of the things that y'all still don't want him to do, where he's dropping back into coverage and so on and so forth. He is still basically mastering what they want him to do. And I got a chance to see him being a leader in the mini camps. And it looked like he's just a step quicker. He's in great physical conditioning. I really do also believe that before he had a high ankle sprain at the end of the season, he was really, really coming on and making himself a real dominant force on the Jaguars defense. So, in my opinion, look for Trayvon Walker and Andre Cisco to be in that conversation next year whenever this comes up about guys in the top 10 of at their respective positions in the National Football League. All right, man. We thank y'all for joining us today here for another edition of Locked On Jaguars. As we always say, make sure you take care of each other and tune in again. And tune in tomorrow to Locked On NFL and make it your second listen, not your second listen, your second listen, and watch that next because it's always an absolute good show. You can even check it out today. It's on Monday through Friday, every single day. Make sure you check that out. Shout out to the everydayers again and any new listeners. Thank you for joining in today. And come back tomorrow. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. Until then, you guys take care of each other. It's Tony Wiggins with Locked On Jaguars.